Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. And we know there's quite a few international visitors with us this morning, as there is every morning on our Infrastructure Intelligence Summer webinar series. My name's Andy Walker and I'm the editor of Infrastructure Intelligence. And this is the final event of our summer series, a series that's seen more than 2,000 people register for our webinars, most of which, in fact, have been looking at the whole issue of post-COVID recovery and how our infrastructure and construction sector is actually dealing with that. And we're winding up our webinar series today with a very important event, I think it's fair to say, on the issue of the skills challenge for construction. We know we've seen over the past few months how the industry has played, in many cases, a heroic role in actually assisting society, not just in this country, but around the world, in dealing with the worst ravages of the coronavirus pandemic. Now we're obviously in a situation, notwithstanding additional lockdowns that we're all being aware of on the news today, but we're in a situation where we're starting to see some of the economic effects of the coronavirus crisis. And obviously that will touch every single business sector, and it will undoubtedly touch our own construction and infrastructure sector as well. And that's why today we're going to be looking at the particular challenges that are faced by our industry, and particularly with the possibility of a significant downturn in the economy. And we know that the industry, both behind the scenes and very much publicly, has been working hard to ensure that its response can actually deal with whatever gets thrown at us. Today, like all of our other events, we've got a really good panel joining us. We've got Mark Naismith from WSP, who's just having a few broadband issues at the moment, so he may well join us a little bit later on the call. We've got Sarah Beale from the Construction Industry Training Board, Katie Hulland, the President of Women in Transport, and also the Chief Executive of the Association for Consultancy and Engineering, Hannah Vickers. First up, though, is Sarah Beale, who is the Chief Executive of the Construction Industry Training Board. Sarah became Chief Executive of the CITB in January 2017, and she's been leading the CITB ever since, and has seen the organisation through a number of changes in the recent period, changes which, like a lot of firms, have been designed to help make her organisation more responsive and accountable to industry. Previously to her role at the CITB, Sarah held a number of roles within the financial sector in both commercial environments and the not-for-profit sector, and has a particular experience in company mergers and people management, which I think, given the current climate that we're about to go into, will be very, very useful indeed. So without further ado, Sarah, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Andy, and thank you for the opportunity to come and speak to you today. And good morning, everybody. I think it's safe to say that COVID-19 presents possibly the biggest challenge our industry has ever faced in the last 50 years. Construction output, as we all know, went down almost 30% year on year in the 3 months to May, before growing back to some extent, around 8% during the month of May. We're still waiting to see what type of recovery is ahead, whether it's the L shape or the U shape or the V shape, all of which will have very different demands and at different times on skills. And whilst it's safe to say there's no typical downturn, in previous downturns and recessions, we have seen significant skills lags created. A result of employers being forced to deprioritise training as a result of other business pressures, and only reprioritising them well into the recovery phases. And that's created a gap. This pattern is, of course, usually more acute in construction due to our large SME base and often operating through tight operating margins. Employers are telling us that the single biggest skills concern at the moment is staff retention. a huge loss of expertise to the industry, as well as the big employment contraction this year and next, will absolutely slow recovery due to the skills gaps that losing those people create. This is going to be further exacerbated if at the same time we don't attract and train the future workforce with the future skills that's needed. And I think retention needs are going to be covered well today, particularly in Hannah's section. So I don't want to repeat too much, but I don't think we can emphasise enough the importance of doing all we can to retain the skills and experience that the industry needs. But I'm going to focus instead on talking about the concern we have around our talent pipeline and our new recruits into the industry. Firstly, we expect a significant fall in the number of apprentices that employers can take this year. CITB's latest customer voice survey shows that, encouragingly, 73% of employers who have an apprentice now expect them to complete that apprenticeship. However, only 22% say that they plan to recruit new apprentices in the next 12 months. And we predict up to 60% decline in apprenticeship starts from that we'd previously planned for the year. The Construction Leadership Council's People Survey taken in June reinforces that, and that found that 60% of the 465 employers surveyed were going to take on fewer apprentices in September and beyond due to the business conditions. And we further fear that the winding down of the furlough scheme could trigger more redundancies than we're predicting at the moment. Addressing this is going to be critical, given that apprenticeships are one of the main routes still for formal industry recruitment at entry level. Out of the circa 20,500 people that entered in 2018, 11,350 entered through an apprenticeship. Secondly, we also anticipate more young people will enter further education, given the reduced apprenticeship offer and reduced job opportunities. And this was already an area that we had to address. Here, construction is missing out on a huge untapped pool of talent, with over 1 in 4, in fact up to 28% of learners who finish FE courses actually come into the industry through any route that's known to us. The two big issues that stop that are course content and lack of work readiness. And about 60% of learners who are unsuccessful in applying for apprenticeship are told it's because they don't have the work experience that employers are looking for. And despite that, only 23% of employers currently offer work placements. And obviously that's a figure in further danger given this current situation. So what are we doing to tackle some of these things? Hopefully, many people will be aware of the Construction Leadership's Roadmap to Recovery and the CITB Skills Plan, both of which have 3 phases: restart, recover and reinvent. And there'll be actions within each of those 3 phases to ensure that we get the right skills when we need them and where we need them in order to help us return back to growth. In the short term, action was all about protecting existing provision. And we need to do all we can to help employers retain existing workforce, including apprentices. But then, of course, we need to look at bringing more people into the industry. In the long term, we need to reinvent the skills and training landscape, increasing industry's focus on upskilling, making the apprenticeship levy work better for the construction industry, and developing routes into construction and workplace models that help the industry modernise through better standards and qualifications. And this is all only going to happen through closer partnership working between industry, government and further education. And as such, I'm very proud that CITB has been a key partner and contributor to the CLC's Roadmap to Recovery, which I think has been an excellent example of real collaboration. I think there's already been great strides made since the plan was launched on the 1st of June. And touching on some of those that helped employers during the restart phase, CITB provided a levy payment holiday until September, and we've announced an overall reduction in levy collection over the next 2 years. we advanced apprenticeship grant payments to help employers retain apprentices. That saw more than £3.7 million paid to 1,800 employers and supported around 4,200 apprentices when they needed it. We also made individual contact to over 10,000 apprentices, providing them with individual support. And under the CITB's Skill Stabilisation Plan, we've prioritised direct funding for employers through the Skills and Training Fund, making available £8 million for small and micro businesses and £3.5 million for medium-sized. And we also launched a new funding scheme aimed at larger companies to support them with their leadership and management, helping them adapt to the new environment. We have provided training to help site managers implement guidance on the safe operation of construction on site, and developed a whole range of distance learning and e-learning tools, which actually have proved so successful that I think they'll be used long after this pandemic. The announcement of the new talent retention scheme for construction and built environment, which Hannah's going to be talking about, so I won't cover in any detail, is another huge win in my eyes for the industry. I'm delighted to be involved in its future development, as I can see that this is going to become a long-term initiative for the sector, and we can link it to a range of skill supports, including access to the work experience opportunities, the apprenticeship opportunities, and the Go Construct website to provide information to career changers. And looking forward, the CLC are already working to the reinvent stages of skills and training landscape, and just two of the initiatives that's included that I'll cover very briefly. The first one is the Construction Skills Fund. CITB secured an additional £7.5 million worth of funding from government to continue the Construction Skills Fund for the next 12 months. And that is to provide on-site work experience to over 6,000 individuals, with a target of getting at least 3,000 of those into sustained jobs by next September, and seriously increase the level of diversity, which again is a topic that I know others are covering in depth later on. And the other initiative is that we're exploring with government and the Association of Colleges a new route for further education into the industry, addressing that issue that I highlighted earlier on, and making it as easy as possible for those predominantly young people to make a successful transition from further education into real jobs. Then, of course, we can start looking to develop the new skills to support the zero carbon and more productive systems of construction that will be just around the corner. And to finish, I guess I want to say that collaboration across the industry through the Construction Leadership Council has been absolutely amazing, and I think helped enable quick actions and access to government support. And this has to be a model we continue. I would welcome you all to get in touch directly through the CLC or CITB, and without stealing Hannah's thunder, ask for more and more support to the talent retention scheme, which I think is going to help retain, as I say, the skills and experience we have, but also enable us onboarding new skills for the future. So thank you very much, Andy.
Thanks very much, Sarah. Some very important points I think you've flagged up there. I think the issue of apprenticeships is very, very important indeed. And I know that a number of our speakers will reflect on that during the course of their contributions this morning. And I think it's also interesting, and you won't be the first person to have said this, of course, actually framing the scale of the challenge, the biggest challenge ever facing our industry, the need to try and avoid as far as possible skills lags and shortages as well, but also not forgetting the issue that has always been an issue I think in our sector, and that is how do we make the sector more attractive? How do we attract that new layer of people into construction? Shouldn't be forgotten, notwithstanding the you know, the very sort of unique circumstances in which we find ourselves. There will be, during the course of this morning's webinar, references made to various points of assistance for the industry, and we'll try and wrap those together in the article that we post online on the Infrastructure Intelligence website after today's webinar. So do keep an eye out for that. We'll certainly signpost some of the links on the website, and those links will include some very practical webinars that I know are being organised next week by the Association for Consultancy and Engineering. So do keep a lookout for those. We're going to flag those up in the post webinar email that everyone will receive who's registered for the webinar as well, so you won't miss out on anything there. But I know that those events will be very important, you know, for those who actually need them. But Sarah, thanks for that for now. We'll obviously come back to you in the discussion. Just a word on the discussion: if anyone does have any questions, please put them in the questions box in the GoToWebinar portal on your screen. That's depending on what you're watching or listening on, it's in the top right hand corner of the screen. Put them in there. If you want to put your firm's name down, feel free to do that. Happy to give you a plug for your firm as well. But let's have plenty of questions coming for all our panel when they've all spoken. Speaking of which, the next speaker is Mark Naismith, who's the UK Chief Executive Officer of WSP. For those that don't know, and there can't be many, WSP is one of the leading consultancy firms, multidisciplinary firms. In fact, they do everything really within construction and infrastructure. Mark is based between London and Edinburgh, which is quite a wide remit in terms of where he's based, and he's accountable and responsible for the strategic growth and direction of WSP in the UK. And WSP have a very, very diverse client base across both the public and the private sector, and doing all sorts of fantastic stuff, making a difference in the built and natural environment. So Mark, over to you.
Okay, good morning, Andy. I'm very pleased to be on this panel today, so thank you for asking me. I'm very much just going to build on the points that Sarah's just made. I suppose where I'm coming from this morning is as much a plea to our industry, and the area relating to skills challenge that I'd like to dwell on is very much about the retention of our future talent, and in particular those early career professionals both at apprenticeship and graduate level. Many of us that have been around the block as long as I have will have witnessed the past recessions, which I'm sure we all wished wouldn't happen again, but we've all witnessed before the loss of that talent and at that early career professional stage from our sector. And then as a consequence, we have the challenges of an unbalanced workforce when the economy picks back up, and then we wonder why we've got a gap in that mid-range of skills across the industry. This predicament then feeds into that vicious circle scenario, and as the industry then puts pressure on the government to accelerate and make visible a strong pipeline of projects, yet at the same time, we as an industry then claim we have a skills shortage, and we must look to try and avoid this this time round. As an industry, we're now facing a few skill challenges, and unless we all play our part to retain those early career professionals, we are just storing up a problem for the future. The challenges that we have as an industry, and certainly as a business leader, are threefold at the moment in the UK. Firstly, good old Brexit. I think we'd all thought Brexit had disappeared, but it's not. There's a reduction in the European students applying to universities and colleges in the UK, together with a reduction in the number of European graduates that we will have coming to UK to fill that skill gap going forward. And we have, as a UK, both in consultancy and construction, relied on that European graduate intake over the past decade or so to help plug the skill shortage in the UK. So Brexit is going to have another implication for us going forward. So on top of everything else, we've then got post-COVID. We've got the potential hiatus of UK school leavers not coming into our industry at graduate and apprenticeship level. And also, now as the economy starts to dip, we've also got the possibility of our in-train or being trained graduates and apprentices now being made redundant as a consequence as the recession starts to bite. So as I said, three different problems, but all contributing or not contributing to the skill challenge. So in any crisis, though, the easiest bit for us to manage is the bit within our own control, and that is to protect what we have now and not to make the downstream problem even worse for ourselves by losing the current future talent. Business decisions taken now will set up our industry for success or for failure when we emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic and the associated economic downturn that's now facing us. I would also say, though, that now more than ever in the digital age, we need that diversity of thought. We need the skills and the knowledge from our early career professionals, and we must continue to support those who want to join our profession, even when faced with the various challenges that we currently have when trying to grow and run a business. I fully accept, though, again, as a business leader, that this balancing act between reshaping your business in times of economic downturn is difficult, but we must really look ahead and look at the future also, or we're simply just going to make a rod for our own backs and go back to that old argument about challenging the government for pipeline and then having the ongoing comments that we have the skill shortage. I did welcome the Chancellor's announcements recently, where he made some really interesting moves with regards to supporting the young and emerging professionals, notably through the job retention scheme and bonus, grants for traineeships, and the Kickstart scheme. I think that's all fantastic. However, I must say that I am concerned that this isn't enough and that the industry relies on these measures alone. And whilst letting our current graduates and apprentices go through redundancy programs, as I said, that's just going to make a further problem for us in due course. I have also been really pleased with the great work that's been done with the Construction Leadership Council and in association with the ACE on the Construction Talent Retention Scheme. And was really pleased to see that the government has granted funding for this portal now to be set up, and I'm sure Hannah will touch on this again, where we have the opportunity to try and retain the skills and experience within our sector. My only concern is that a lot of the measures that the government have brought in would appear to be more short-term, particularly with some of the retention schemes only lasting for 6 months, which personally I think is maybe not long enough. But we now have got this portal set up to try and retain the talent and the skills within our sector, advertising job vacancies, but also for where colleagues are made redundant, where they can apply for posts and hopefully then to retain good people within our industry. This has all come at a critical time for the sector, but unless it is known about and used, it will not support the wider cause. So a lot of this now is educating and communicating across the wider industry that this portal now exists. Finally, we all welcome new graduates and apprentices into our organisations every year. I mean, WSP in the UK, we have about 250 graduates and apprentices joining us every year. And I do ask, and this is my plea, that we continue to look to recruit early career professionals into our business and industry throughout the next 12 months, even if we've got delayed starts. Again, I know many of the consultancies, businesses are delaying starts from the autumn into January next year, but I still think that's a really good move because we have all the onboarding difficulties at the moment with working from home, and even just to delay by a couple of months is still a good thing. What we mustn't do, though, is lose a whole year of recruitment at that stage, because again, that will just compound the problem in due course. So there is a lot of extra planning required, and we do need a big effort just to try and retain the skills at that lower level. Again, from a WSP point of view, we've ring-fenced all early career professionals from any reshaping of the business to try and help this cause. I think just finally as well, skills and capability is always going to be an agenda, but even more so during turbulent times when tough decisions are having to be made. And if we're really going to make good progress and positive strides on the net zero agenda and the application of digital in the workplace, we very much need the early career professionals who underpin the talent and the skill, which is going to be here for the next generation to come. So again, just to finish, I do ask our industry, please to consider all these points when making difficult decisions over the coming months, because our collective contribution will help to make the future much more sustainable. and providing the skills and talent that we know we need to deliver our clients' projects, we do need that future talent coming through over the next couple of years. So that's me, Andy. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mark. And I think a really important message there that you've outlined in terms of what WSP is doing in relation to safeguarding that vitally important cohort of emerging professionals. And I know that's something that you're passionate about. I know that you've gone public in the industry about that issue, and I hope that the industry is actually listening to that message, because it's something that we just cannot afford to lose as an industry, and not just from the point of view of age, although that's obviously vital, but to this diversity of thought that we need to ensure that we get within our industry. And I think, you know, what flows from that also as well is creativity, which I think is really, really important in making the sector more attractive to a wider range, a much more diverse range of people as well. I know there's questions coming through, specific questions as well on this issue, and you know, it'll be good to get you know, some of your insights on those a little bit later on. But for the moment, thanks for that, Mark, and we'll obviously return to you during the discussion. The next speaker is Katie Holland, who is is Associate Director at Turner & Townsend, but is also the President of Women in Transport. Katie's worked in the sector for more than 14 years. She started out with tube lines, and then she progressed to business improvement manager roles for Network Rail before joining the consultancy sector, first with Mace Group and now Turner & Townsend. Women in Transport is a not-for-profit networking organisation that provides access to a varied events programme and a very powerful network of individuals within the transport sector. If you're not aware of Women in Transport, then feel free to have a look at their website, which can be found at womenintransport.com. And it's worth noting that women make up 47% of the UK workforce, yet in the transport sector they account for only 20% of workers, and that clearly is something that you know, shouldn't be the case and needs addressing. It's not Katie's sole role as President of Women in Transport, but I'm sure she'll have some comments on the issue of female representation within the industry, and I'm sure a lot more besides. Katie, over to you.
Thank you very much, Andy. Thank you. And thank you so much to you and the team at Infrastructure Intelligence for giving us this opportunity. Like many organisations who are we're run by a voluntary board, this has been a really, really challenging time for charities and voluntary organisations alike. So appreciate the opportunity to help raise our profile. No more welcome than at this time. So yes, as President of Women in Transport, unsurprisingly, my answer to tackling the skills challenge as we come out of lockdown is to really have obviously a focus on diversity as a whole, but today I'm going to be particularly talking about gender diversity. We have an enormous untapped pool of talent in women, and some of the stats that you just quoted there about 47% of the workforce, yet only 20% representation in the transport sector. So the problem in itself is fairly obvious. But it's actually slightly worse than this, because within the modes themselves, you find that you know, the numbers are even more stark. So, for example, 6% of women pilots, 6.5% women bus drivers, 8% of rail engineers. You know, we really need to be bringing those skills to the fore to design, build and operate all of these infrastructure projects, HS2, and support Boris's build plans to be able to fulfil that challenge. So enter stage left, Women in Transport, and what the role is that we play in the industry. So we're a not-for-profit. think there's about 20 of us at the moment on a voluntary basis on the board, and we also have our wonderful CEO and what we call our glues, who holds us all together to help run the organisation. So in relative terms, very small, but we really hope that we make a big contribution to the industry through what we do. So we started about 15 years ago. It was actually a very small group of very forward-thinking ladies from the industry. A couple of names to mention there that I think you'll probably recognise. WSP's Rachel Skinner, Senior Vice and soon-to-be President of the ICE, and Valerie Todd, Human Resources Director for Siemens, but was also known for being Crossrail's Head of Talent and Development for many, many years. So the reason that's key in those days, there was actually very limited data available about diversity and its impacts and gender diversity. But instinctively, they knew that attracting and retaining more women to the industry had to be a really good thing. So thankfully now there is a vast body of evidence that supports the case that businesses do perform better, achieve a higher employee engagement rate, have improved safety performance, increased client and employee retention, and often have better operating margins as a consequence of having a diverse workforce. And in particular, there are various reports that give you the specifics around the impact of women, which was recently reported at actually you could potentially reach up to 21% better performance by having women on your board. So we're lucky nowadays that we support over 500 members, and we've got a reach of over 1 million through our social media channels, and we maximise the use of those by offering a strong support network. So we run lots of events, and probably more importantly, we try to foster a community of friendship, encouragement and confidence. You know, linked to that is then offering skills building events in an environment that women feel safe to learn and grow in. So for example, we do lots of construction site tours and professional skills training, but of course we always make sure that there's a diverse audience within those skills building groups. The other very important thing we do as well is that we run a mentoring scheme, and that's this year. In the last year, actually, we've managed to reach out and pair together over 30 professionals. So that's been really successful. Perhaps something that I think probably helps on a wider scale for the industry is we inspire women by showcasing inspirational female role models. We particularly use our social media networks to achieve this, and really using our website as well to highlight some of the career opportunities that are available. I think that will probably come up multiple times today about really showcasing that. I mean, for us, it's really about demonstrating that transport and infrastructure isn't necessarily always about nuts and bolts. Actually, it's about social purpose as well. There's a whole range of different skills that are required across the industry. We connect and knowledge share, and also as well we keep our membership costs really low so that we can help those that like we talked about, the early career starters earlier on, and really help them to progress as well. So we cover all phases of people's career paths, whether it's senior leadership right down to apprenticeship and graduate level. So we recently ran a survey of our members, and we thought we'd try and add So we thought that was really interesting. We also found as well that a lot of caring responsibilities had been taken on by women through lockdown. So again, we thought that was quite an interesting output. So just to talk through quickly what some of the. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine. Carry on. looks like we might have some connectivity problems with Katie at the moment. Can my other panelists just let me know whether they can hear Katie or not?
Can you hear me?
Yes, just carry on. Just carry on. We can hear you.
Okay, all right then. Apologies for that. I was talking to myself quite happily, thinking that you could hear me. So first of all, what I'll just talk you through quickly is the some of the practical steps that we think organisations can take to retain women in the transport sector. So firstly, think innovatively. So find ways to, Mark touched on earlier, find ways to unlock funds and resources to continue to help organisations like ours and other industry bodies to support growth in that industry knowledge share and collaboration on gender and wider diversity issues. Also as well, if you are going through really challenging times as an organisation, it doesn't have to be money that you give to help. So, for example, encouraging furloughed workers to provide voluntary support to organisations can be really helpful. Or perhaps if there are staff that are currently underutilised, use them to really be looking into specifics of your organisation and how you can improve diversity. So one really great example is one of our supporters has carried out an investigation into their graduate training scheme and the timing of the applications that it's received, and did a comparison against when men applied versus women. Then implemented some changes based on that and saw a 50% increase in the number of women applying to their graduate scheme. I think as well, you know, it's just thinking differently about how you engage with women within your workforce, and never more than at the moment, and really looking for the opportunities that can come out of this difficult time. One example is that I've been, for example, working internationally, which I've never been able to do before because I've always had to be home for 6 o'clock. Taking that away has meant that, you know, I can really diversify and approach different markets, which is great. Also working together across the industry, again, I think it's been touched on multiple times, but COVID really had a fantastic way of gelling everyone in the industry together. It was a real call to arms. So an example of this is that industry bodies collaborating, such as the recent WISE 1 in a Million campaign, bringing together, that was 20 different bodies independently tackling STEM recruitment. Think longer term. I think it's something we're all used to hearing in infrastructure anyway, but it really is important to find ways to keep investing in schemes that are already established within your organisation to support that attraction and retention of women. So when that re-evaluation of budgets and you know, has to happen, then, you know, organisations that are investing, embracing in those new ways of working will make a real success of it in the longer term. But it's really important not just to consider it on this year's balance sheet. So really think about the benefits and the opportunities over the longer term, and the longer term benefit that that can bring to your organisation. So with ourselves as well, I just wanted to briefly mention we've had to also innovate and do things differently as Infrastructure Intelligence has, with moving all of our events programs onto an online platform. So challenging at the start, but actually we've seen some really amazing benefits come from it. We originally had to rely on physical hubs to start to really make sure that we got attendance from across the UK. That's now, you know, it's now become part of our programme that we'll be able to offer membership to really help even out the regional inequality across the UK of our membership. So, you know, that's something even that we've seen a difference in. Another huge difference is that we've seen a huge change in the number of men attending our events, which is something we've been working on for a really long time. And we're really encouraged to see that the online format seems to have made that perhaps a little bit more comfortable for men to join in the conversation as well. So, so that's really positive. The final point then is focusing on your diversity data. So a great example of this is the gender pay gap report. It's a really brilliant way to test how well your efforts are working as an organisation. The ONS reported that among all employees, the gender pay gap fell from 17.8% in 2018 to 17.3% in 2019. But of course, this year's seen the government suspend mandatory gender pay gap reporting, and we would really encourage you just to publish anyway. It doesn't have to be a huge production. It just gives you a really good handle and measure of your progress against the pay gap and shows a huge commitment to women in your organisation. Just to finish up, I mean, really just to emphasise that if we get this right, the prize could be huge. We're currently, lots of figures reported, but we could be missing up to £47 billion from the economy by not maximising the potential of women in business. So this really is a great opportunity to rebalance that social and economic inequality and provide a really bright future for women coming into the industry. The feedback from our members is really loud and clear. They would really like to see organisations continuing to make diversity and gender diversity a priority in their business plans going forwards. And certainly from the Women in Transport point of view, we pledge to continue to support those organisations as much as we can, and of course their male supporters within them, with the knowledge and support that they're going to need to thrive in our industry and embrace this new world that the tragedy of COVID has left us with. So yes, just a final call out, www.womenintransport.com. Do go and take a look at us. We'd love to have you as a member. Thanks again to Andy for giving us the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie, for that. Again, as with all of our speakers, some really important points that you've raised there. I think the positive impact of diversity actually in all its forms, and we'll get to that in the discussion. Some very interesting questions coming up in the chat at the moment. I think it really is vital that, notwithstanding the challenging times that we're in at the moment, that the whole question of gender diversity and diversity in its widest form is not forgotten about in our industry, because there is absolutely no question that diverse organisations do better. All the stats say that, all the data that's available says that, and we need to remember that going forward as we come out of this current crisis. I said there was a lot of questions coming up in the chat. And I'm sure one of the questions is going to be answered almost immediately, because one of the questions is about the construction talent retention scheme. And our next speaker is Hannah Vickers, who's the Chief Executive of the Association for Consultancy and Engineering, ACE, and as well as leading that business association. Hannah has been very, very busy in the background and in the foreground, helping to frame the industry's response to the COVID-19 crisis, especially around this particular issue in terms of skills and talent retention. And I'm sure Hannah will say a little bit about that in a moment. Hannah is a civil engineer by profession, previously led the policy and public affairs team at ICE, and has been involved very closely with government, so knows her way around that labyrinthine sort of organisation in all its forms. And prior to her role at the ICE, she advised ministers at the Treasury on infrastructure delivery policy, so she knows her stuff. Anyway, that's enough from me bigging Hannah up. She's more than capable of that herself. Hannah, over to you.
Thank you, Andy. I shall pay you later. Okay, no, great. Thank you very much. So I was going to just touch on two things really, and I'm conscious we've got some questions as well. I should try and keep this brief. Firstly, I wanted to cover the Construction Talent Retention Scheme, just to bring everybody up to speed on what that is and how to access it. And then secondly, to just look a little bit further ahead around what that actually does for us over the medium term as an opportunity as we come out of COVID to recover and retain our skills and talent within the sector. So I can see we've had some questions on this. So the Construction Talent Retention Scheme is now live. Really pleased to say it's something which has come about in a matter of weeks. So proof that actually we can be very agile and collaborative in construction. The portal itself, and it is an online portal at the moment, it's relevant for both businesses and individuals. So the purpose of it really is to avoid what happened with us in the last recession, where because of our fragmented nature, we actually ended up losing a lot of talent, a lot of people out of the industry, over sort of 500,000 we lost out of the industry. So that is the, if you like, the underpinning challenge laid at the door of the Construction Talent Retention Scheme, is to try to help us avoid that, and recognising that different parts of the sector will recover and respond at different rates. So some bits will be busy, some bits will be quieter. We recognise that there's a need perhaps to centralise how we redeploy people, how we support people move across the sector without actually having to leave it, even if, for example, the business that they're in is making redundancies. So the whole purpose behind the talent retention scheme is that it's about trying to bring us together as an industry to retain and support the individuals and the talent that we have in it, so that hopefully as many people as possible can stay during this sort of turbulent period, can stay within the industry, and we don't end up with a skills gap. So that's the vision, if you like. It will develop, but in the very short term, that's what it's focused on doing. It's completely free. So what is absolutely fabulous about this is we've been able to secure government support for it. I think as testament to how we came together under the banner of the Construction Leadership Council, this is actually 100% government funded up until April next year, to get us through the most challenging period of the COVID crisis. So it costs nothing for a business to engage with this. It costs nothing for an individual to engage with this. It costs nothing for a business association to promote this to their members. And I think that actually has been the catalyst for it to become such a sort of widespread initiative. So if you're a business, you can use this to do your recruitment for free. You can access support through it to post your vacancies, to automate that if you're a large firm and you've got a lot of vacancies, to actually put them in here. And you can also search for candidates, so it works both ways. It's if you like, a sort of ring-fenced talent pool for you, free of charge, for people who are displaced within the industry. If you're an individual, you can register on it yourself. So if you are going through a redundancy process, or even as we start to look further ahead, you're somebody who has perhaps been displaced from another sector that's interested in getting into construction, you can register and you can start to see and get a feel in one place for the jobs that are on offer. So I think what's really powerful about this is, well, it's free, it's centralised, but within that, it's got huge potential moving forward. So, like I said, in the short term, we're focusing on getting businesses and getting jobs and getting individuals on there, so we can do this cross-matching, and that is applicable from everybody from apprentices. So, Mark touched on the risk that apprentices get displaced out of organisations, emerging professionals. It doesn't matter what grade you are, you can use this. It's not for people who are fully qualified. It's not just for people who are well experienced. Actually, if you are in the sector, wherever, this is applicable to you. So you can register and use it and look for your next position. And equally, businesses can look in there to pull talent through. So that's the first piece, really. It's a huge success since it's gone live. So we've got over 550 businesses involved in this, registered, committing to use it. That's growing every day. Already, recognising it only went live sort of this time last week, or not even this time, 3 o'clock in the afternoon last Friday was when it went live. Since then, we've got 250 jobs on it that are vacant jobs with legitimate construction companies, not shell companies, not, they are real jobs on there. So 250 jobs and about the same number of individuals. Now, I'm sure it's not going to be as simple as like for like matching. So what we need to be pushing up is both the number of jobs and the number of individuals. So like I said, the takeaway message on the talent retention scheme is get your business registered, get using it. It's free, we need to use it. And actually, I think there is huge benefit for us if we take a step back and look beyond the individuals. The opportunity for us to be retaining that talent and redeploying it across the sector is a sort of big long-term business win for all of us. So that's the talent retention scheme itself. I think what's quite powerful about it is it's supported by a lot of the business associations on the Construction Leadership Council, in addition to those businesses. So if you're feeling that you're being bombarded with communications and sign up and please get involved in this, then actually I'm quite pleased about that, because it's showing that as a group of business associations, we are collaborating together. if I were to say something about the sort of the feeling of the TRS project, you know, it's government and industry coming together, it's businesses coming together, it's business associations coming together. So actually the whole sort of underpinning purpose is very much one of collaboration for the greater good, and coming out of that is inclusivity. There is nothing in there that says, regardless of your grade, regardless of your background, regardless of which part of the sector you're in, that you are not eligible. Everybody in the whole sector, regardless of SIC codes or anything technical like that, if you are in this sector, you are welcome on this portal. And that is something that I think is, again, really powerful, and perhaps something that we inadvertently don't get right when we look more broadly at some of our attraction and retention. So that's the portal itself. I'll just give a couple of minutes now on where it could go. So I think, you know, in itself, it's a really, really useful tool for us, but actually as an initiative, and as I look to Sarah on this, because this is the sort of point at which Sarah and I kind of join forces to take this forward. If we've got it under my leadership this far, I think there is something really powerful that, you know, the likes of Sarah and myself can come together to take it forward. And actually, if we look further ahead, you know, we've heard that this for us is a short-term disruption against a backdrop of really long-term demand for our services in both consultancy and in construction. And actually, we're a sector, when you look at the wider economy, that has the potential to grow and has the potential to bring people in and redeploy from the wider economy, subject to us having that underpinning sort of pipeline of development. But if we want that sort of responsibility, if we want to sort of almost take a lead beyond our sector, take a lead for the economy on reskilling, retaining, attracting and developing people as a really powerful component of the economy, then I think we need to think a little bit more about how we go about that. So, you know, there's all sorts of really exciting opportunities. We've seen substantial disruption to hospitality, but also the creative and the arts sectors. Now, while that's horrible to the people that is happening to, there is, you know, if you take away the labels, sitting there is a pipeline of people with inherent digital skills, creativity, ambition, and real passion to make a difference, all of which we have in our sector. So, you know, the opportunity is there. They're the right kinds of people that we could be bringing in to help us service that sort of long-term demand for our sector's needs. I think we just need to think a little bit about how we take this talent retention scheme forward, so it goes beyond just retention and actually looks more wholly at reorganisation of skills and the workforce across the economy, and how we will support reskilling of people in that. Because for the first time, we will have a centralised portal that gives us the management information to understand where our reskilling needs are. And that in turn gives us the opportunity to have a more mature conversation with governments as an industry about how they can best support us. So, you know, all in all, we're kind of gearing up, if you like, with the right intentions, with the start of the right tools to really have something quite powerful here that sort of puts us as, you know, consultancy and construction businesses at the forefront of the economic recovery, and actually in turn, and maybe perhaps selfishly and closer to our hearts, gives us access to the right talent that we need in order to be able to fulfill that long term. I think probably the challenge I would lay down to us is that we need to be braver, we need to be inclusive and more supportive and more open-minded about the talent that we bring in, and actually do more in terms of apprenticeships, do more in terms of being a little bit more flexible around career paths, around qualifications, and challenging some of our historic institutions to really help us on that journey to make sure that people have got those roots in, and we can actually, there's nothing holding us back in taking that sort of step forward and leading not just the, you know, retention of skills within the construction sector, but actually the retention, attraction and growth of skills to the construction sector as part of the sort of wider economic growth coming out of COVID and the recovery. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks very much indeed for that, Hannah. And I think it's really important to stress the joint work, the collaboration work that's been done across the industry over the past few months, and really some of the rapid work that's been done to actually get this construction talent retention scheme up and running. I mean, the construction industry always makes the point that it is a collaborative industry, that it works in partnership, and I think that's been no better shown in the recent period with the response to this particular crisis. We'll send out details about the talent retention scheme later. However, those that do want to know where it is, it obviously is an online portal. It's at clc-talentretention.co.uk. That's clc-talentretention.co.uk. And as Hannah said, hundreds of jobs, possibly thousands of jobs, are going to go on that portal over the course of the coming weeks and months. And certainly it will be a very valuable website for people to visit who may find themselves, unfortunately, in a challenging position as a result of the crisis. And I know that there's people on this webinar today, and some of them have posted questions in the chat, who've found themselves in that situation. And I think, you know, in the same way that the industry has come together to look after the industry, we've got to come together to look after the individuals in the industry as well. I think that's really important going forward. Right, it's time to get to some of the questions, and we've got some really interesting questions to ask of the panel. So I'm going to get right to them right now and start off with a question which I think sort of speaks to flexibility. Really, we've all had to work flexible in the recent period, and this is a question from Lauren Alderidge. And Lauren says, myself and a few other graduates have found ourselves having to move away within the UK from the city that our office is in during the COVID crisis. Obviously, our current teams would like to keep us, you know, as per employee retention plans. However, would it be reasonable to relocate to another UK office so as to stay within the company that they currently work for when working when full-time working from home stops? Also, how might we go about approaching this if there are no specific vacancies for current graduates? So, you know, that flexibility of maybe people have been, you know, had to work, you know, away from their, you know, their home area. How flexible can we be? And I'm going to throw that question first of all to Mark Naismith. Mark, your observations on, you know, that whole flexibility area, please.
Yeah, I thought that one was coming my way, Andy. Thanks for that. And Lauren, it is a really good question. And I'm certainly thinking of sweeping statement, but all organisations and businesses need to be flexible at this time. You know, we've had to adapt to that very quickly over the last few months, and certainly going forward, things are not going to get back to normal quickly. So it's in everybody's interest that we provide that flexibility as employers for our staff and colleagues. I can't speak on behalf of your organisation, but certainly going back to office in your local area, absolutely. I mean, I would encourage that. In fact, part of the plan that we're looking at for reopening offices is the criteria are actually clients, projects, and early career professionals. So, you know, we're not going to get back to 100% attendance back at the office every day for some time to come, if ever, going forward. So I'm sure that any organisation would welcome the enthusiasm that you're showing to get back into an office in the near future at somewhere closer to where you're located at this moment in time. So how do you go about that? Well, most organisations, I think I can speak on behalf of just every organisation, will be going through a future flexible working policy at the moment. And I'd be very surprised if your organisation isn't looking at things like this. I suggest you approach your line manager or one of your directors to discuss this. Sounds very easy. It should be easy, and I think it's a key to retaining the EPCs within our industry.
Obviously, you're working at Turner and Townsend. I mean, you know, what's your sort of experience been of both during the crisis, but also the point the question has just been raised?
So yeah, I mean, absolutely, it is really important. I'm very fortunate. I also sound similar to WSP. I work for an organisation that has always been very good at understanding my needs. One particular thing I know we do at TNT is to really try and focus on the inclusivity out of ED&I. and really think about, it just comes back to the same point that, we support from the Women in Transport point of view around really thinking about that longer term investment. Sometimes they're, working flexibly involves thinking differently. It may involve, particularly in the professional services, working collaboratively with a client, for example, to actually be able to make it happen. But it is worth that extra investment. The longer term, retention over a longer period of time, and over the span of a career, it is really worth making that compromise from the employer's perspective. So yes, just supporting there what Mark said, and it's a really good question. And I from a Women in Transport point of view, we would certainly encourage organisations to just think differently about location, and do people really need to be in their London office or wherever it may be.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to move to another question, actually, and that's a question that speaks to this whole area of, I suppose, creativity, really. It's from Georgia Hughes, who actually chairs ACE's Emerging Professionals Network. And George is asking, as a sector, how do we foster the right environment to be creative with the new skills that we need to be developing? And Georgia says, to quote a Forbes article from 2018, quote, "No one can be creative on a treadmill." So George is asking, how do we avoid gaining new skills but stagnating overall if the industry isn't creative? And I'm going to throw that question first of all on creativity to Hannah. Hannah, got any views on that?
Thank you, Andy. Yeah, no, I think it's a really good question. And there is a risk, as you say, we all sort of sit at home in our little boxes, that we lose that kind of creative, collaborative brainstorming energy and experience. So, I think this is going to be a key challenge to businesses when they're looking at their sort of workplace strategies, if you like. And I know a number are obviously looking at actually what sort of space, what sort of environment do they need in future. So if you say on some cases, in some circumstances, you want to be really flexible and, support as much as possible working from home where that's what people want to do. But equally, there are certain things where, as we've seen from the questions, people do want to get together. They do want to be creative. They do want to kind of collaborate and have some of those collaboration spaces. So, I think it's going to be a mixed bag in terms of how organisations meet that. What I'm quite interested in is seeing something which I think, we might see the rise of sort of business tourism, where actually you don't have these fixed offices, but you have people being brought together for, collaborative periods of time. I know from something I'm working on at the moment, we've got a new team forming, and you can go so far, but until you actually get there, and as one person said, I want to be in a room grabbing the pen off of you and shouting at the whiteboard. I think it's that, and you can't necessarily, with the best technology in the world, actually have that same experience. So I think we're going to see those kind of environments created, and demand for those sorts of environments over and above static office environments perhaps grow, such that we start to get teams that are remotely based but have these quite structured, come together, think tank, shut yourselves in a room kind of, and I think actually within that you can, if the demand is there for that, you'll start to see businesses on the other side that specialize in structuring that, so rather than perhaps having your traditional whiteboard sticky post-it note brainstorms, you may get some really interesting and creative facilitation facilities coming up. Where I said this business tourism, I think is, if I was a developer now, that's what I would be looking at with my portfolio, not fixed office space. How can I really get some fantastic kind of, Apple-esque, Google beanbag type environments created? Because I don't think there's been that demand to really drive that market yet. But, if there is, and I think there will be, that's hugely exciting from a creativity point of view.
Thanks, Hannah. It's interesting you should say that, because I got my first email earlier this week that was basically plugging the benefits of virtual away days, would you believe? And there's probably been quite a lot of them going on in the recent period. But it is a thing apparently, and you can get a whole sort of infrastructure around it, including virtual icebreakers. Who knew? But anyway, I just want to move over to Sarah on this, on the creativity question, because I think there are obviously a lot of skills, and in many cases new skills, that the industry is going to need, particularly as we move to a more sort of digital environment. I mean, what's your view on that? You know, is the industry good enough in actually developing and supporting those different skills that we might need in the future?
Thank you. I think we've all talked today about the challenges that we're facing, but I actually think where we are right now is a massive, massive opportunity for significant and fast-paced change. So in lots of front, the diversity side, the skills, we've never had such a burning platform. And in actual fact, I'm seeing a huge range of creativity. And I think it needs to be from two angles. The industry, in order to plug what is a productivity and profitability gap, is going to have to learn to build better, build smarter, and build more effectively, in which case we need to develop those skills. And I think up until now, it's been a bit chicken and egg. Who's going to make that leap? And therefore, who's going to train the skills unless we know they're required? I think that's going to be a huge demand. And on the flip side, it's being creative about how we get the skills. So this pandemic has absolutely, I think, forced change in really traditional chalk and board still environments to online e-learning, really collaborative ways of learning. And some of the intelligence that we're gathering is we've been doing some work after people have taken some online courses, and the levels of retention that they have are higher than they were getting on the face-to-face engagement. And quite a lot of people are actually saying bite-sized chunks in an environment where I feel comfortable, and an environment, particularly young people who are saying this really suits me, has really changed the training agenda. So I think I said in my opener, we'd developed lots of e-learning and distance learning materials and courses with the intention of closing them after the end of this crisis and returning back, if I'm honest, to the tried and tested. And from training providers, employers and individuals, they're saying, please don't do that. This has been fabulous. As ever, it's going to be a blend. So I think we all have different learning styles. We all have different learning preferences, but the ability to incorporate that, I've seen massive creativity. And then I think, as I say, forced by the fact that the industry itself is going to have to modernize and modernize quickly if we're going to have to make up this gap. The demand for those new skills are there, in which case people will be much more open to new ways of adapting them. And I've definitely seen a lot of inverse mentoring, young people coming in and actually being the mentor in some of the skills gaps rather than the other way around, people from other sectors being called in, because we tend to look across our own sector and not often exploit the learnings from others. So I actually think we've got a fabulous opportunity right now, and I can see it already starting.
Thanks for that. Interesting you mentioned there reverse mentoring, which is a very good thing. There's probably been a little bit of unofficial reverse mentoring going on in various people's home offices and back rooms. How do I basically get this particular piece of online kit working or whatever? And
Absolutely.
I know that I've tapped into my stepson's experiences in that area, as well as told him to get off his FIFA as well when I've been on webinars. So that there's challenges on all fronts as far as that's concerned. More questions coming through. I've got one from Jessica Clark. I'm going to ask this one to Mark, but I'd like other people's observations on at least the first bit of the question as well. And that is, Jessica says she's aware that a lot of firms are retracting offers or postponing offers, not taking on graduates and apprenticeships. Will this mean that you need to focus more on the graduates and apprentices that are already in the business, and then ensuring that they have training to help them fill any skills gap that's occurring? And also a supplementary to that, which is specifically aimed at WSP, if it can be answered, will WSP choose to take on apprentices, as it's been reported that they are not taking on any apprentices? I'm not sure what Jessica's saying there. Will WSP choose to take on apprentices? It's been reported they're not taking on any apprentices, or will there be a year gap in that? So I think that's more about when you might be taking them on. So I don't know whether you can say something about that, Mark, that question from Jessica.
Yeah, okay, so there are a few questions within that one question, I think, Jessica, but to answer them in reverse, and I'll try and remember the first one. Well, WSP's position is we are going to continue to recruit. We may not recruit at the level that we have in the last couple of years, but there's very much a mandate that we will continue to recruit apprentices and graduates. We've deferred our entry from the autumn this year to the beginning of 2021. And the main reason that we've done that, and a lot of our competition have done the same thing, is because of the difficulty to onboard new apprentices and graduates in the current climate. So, and I think I can speak on behalf of the industry. There'll be a number of apprentices and graduates who have been furloughed as well over the last couple of months. So now it's that blend of bringing those colleagues back into the workplace, but then also onboarding the new intake for next year. So yeah, and again, my plea to the industry is continue to take on this year's graduates and apprentices, because it's so important for the future, or we'll have that gap in years to come. The first part of the question, Andy, can you remind me what the first part was again?
Yeah, the first part of the question was basically Jessica was saying that she was aware that you know, firms are retracting offers or postponing offers or not taking on graduates and apprenticeship, and she's asking whether that meant you'd need to focus more on your current grads and apprentices and making sure that they were trained up, you know, in such a way.
Yes, I mean, I think the first thing to say in that, which might be a bit controversial, is I think if any organisation's made an offer to a graduate apprenticeship to then withdraw it this year, I think is wrong. I think just from a moral point of view, if you've made an offer, to stick by your offer. It doesn't do any good for the industry when we make offers then pull them. So stick to our commitments. But so again, I encourage that. We're going back to the part about training for current apprenticeships and graduates. Absolutely, but I think the answer to that really is most organisations will have a good apprenticeship and graduate programme, and it's more a case of continuing to invest in these training programmes now and next year rather than stopping, because again, unfortunately, something that a lot of organisations do when times get tough is to stop any spend on training, which again is just false economy. You need to continue with these training schemes during the good and the bad times. So my message again is continue to do what we've been doing over the last 10 years, regardless of the fact that we're into a recession.
Thanks, Mark. Hannah, just your views on the collective industry response in this particular area, you know, the importance of making sure that collectively the industry comes together to safeguard that new layer and those emerging professionals.
Yeah, so this is something which has been very topical actually with the, we have a number of industry leaders groups, of which Mark's obviously one of our members and is very active in that. From the consultancy point of view, I have actually been very pleased that the business leaders are, you know, a lot of them having been through 2008 are being able to take a step back and say, actually, you know, we do recognise that it's really valuable for us to keep, you know, as far as possible, continue to take on our apprentices and our graduates. So I think, you know, that recognition is there, albeit I think individual firms will obviously have different circumstances. But as a collective, they really are trying, or what I'm seeing from the, you know, the industry leaders, they really are trying to fulfil that. I do think that we have a particular challenge at the moment, given that, you know, if you're having to do anything around sort of restructuring, it's always easier when you can do it in person. So I do worry a little bit about the sort of cultural or the perceived impacts of having to do something like this at an arm's length. And I hope that's something that we can, you know, manage our way through. But yeah, on the whole, I've been really, really proud of them actually. That it's, you know, it's not short-term mindset, it's long-term talent retention. That seems to be the topic of conversation, shall we say?
Thanks, Hannah. Slightly changing tack, but still very much looking at the issue of diversity in all its forms. I've got a question here from Roma Agrawal, who she didn't put this in a question, but I know because I've read it. She wrote the award-winning book, at least if it isn't, it should be, Built, The Hidden Stories Behind Our Structures. If you've not read it, I can thoroughly recommend it. And Roma says, I'd like to know how the organisations are responding to the Black Lives Matter movement. This is not a question about how to recruit more diverse staff. Roma's asking what the top level of management is doing to address systemic racism in their companies. And, you know, hard-hitting question from Roma. I'd expect nothing less from her. Who am I going to throw that at first? I'm going to throw that first at Katie. I don't know whether you can offer your observations on that aspect of diversity. Obviously, you come at the diversity issue from another angle, but nevertheless, you know,
we
there
do,
it is.
but yeah, no, absolutely, and actually it is something that that we actually as an organisation have we've decided to think quite long and hard about how we're going to respond to it. I guess so the biggest thing for us, I mean, firstly, is that we you know, we do you know, we completely understand and fully support the need for BAME women to progress within the transport sector. But if I'm being honest, actually, I think where we need to improve, and something that we're looking at doing at the moment, is in the gathering of the data that we actually have available. I mean, that, you know, I've been trying to find data on BAME women in transport in particular, but to be honest, I'm struggling to find data on, you know, on the issue at all. So one of the first things that we're hoping to do is to really start to look at how we can actually get that information. Now, we're lucky that we've got you know, we do collect a lot of data from our members, so we're going to be putting out a bit of a plea really to help us to help the industry get better by being able to collect that information through our membership surveys, and then we can start to build a better picture of you know, what the issues actually are. I think that, you know, I mentioned earlier about gender diversity, and that was the specific reason I split out gender diversity. Diversity isn't just a big pile of, you know, issues that can all be addressed in the same way. Every single one of the protected characteristics has got its own differences. So hence why we really want to just take a little bit of time actually to think about how we can best support our BAME women in transport. Anecdotally, we believe that a really high percentage of our membership are BAME, but we can't say categorically. So that's something that we're going to be working on going forwards, and actually really getting the information and understanding what those issues are.
Thanks, Katie. Sarah, just ask you on this question. Do you think the industry is doing enough in this area? I mean, it's clear that the whole Black Lives Matter movement has actually catapulted this issue, not that it needed catapulting, it certainly shouldn't have done, onto the international agenda. And I think it's led to a degree of introspection and outrospection, if I can use a non-word, of firms actually looking at this issue and thinking, well, look, we're not really where we need to be in this issue. Is our industry doing enough in this area, in your opinion?
I think we'd have to say no when you look at the results of our diversity statistics. So as much as any of us are doing, and I'm aware of multiple different initiatives through, you know, women in construction, BME in construction, lots and lots of different groups. But in truth, the collated impact of that hasn't been enough. So I think, Katie, you said about women in transport, the figures, at least they were in double figures. And when we're looking at women in the widest construction, we're still looking at around 2% in the trades and 11% overall. Black and ethnic minority, I don't believe has ever got over 7%. So whatever we're doing, Andy, we'd have to say, no, we're not doing enough. The change has been glacial. And I think I was at an event, and it was particularly around gender, but actually it started to talk about Black and ethnic minority. And we worked out while somebody was talking that I think if we moved at the same pace we have done for the last 20 or 30 years, it's going to be 200 years before we're anywhere close to an equality level. So it's far too slow. For CITB, we've been looking at it from two angles. One, and I think the question was very much pointed at, what are we doing ourselves? So I've got to be very careful that I feel I live in a glass house. So before I start promoting things to the wider industry, we've started to look at our own organisation, and we haven't got as good a representation by any means. And you can come up with lots of excuses for that, location of your offices and everything else, but it was woeful. And certainly the Black Lives Matter made us as a senior team really look at our recruitment policies, where we were going, why we weren't attracting people, not just the fact of having the excuse of location. And we've actually started to embed a system of equality and diversity training throughout all of our recruiting managers. And we're doing a programme of unconscious bias. so that we can start to identify and hold a mirror up, I guess, to ourselves as individuals and as an organisation. Aside from that, the CLC, as the wider industry with CITB support, is now promoting fairness, inclusion and respect. It's going to be, I think, one of the main streams that gets a CLC-wide endorsement to get behind one industry programme in the same way that we have done with the talent retention scheme, in saying if we all join against a scheme and we collect the appropriate data, we can start shifting the dial on this, but perhaps not whilst we're all doing our own single initiatives that aren't having as the greatest impact that we could possibly have if we joined them together.
Thanks, Sarah. Mark, if I can just ask you on this, because I think the central point here is often this is seen as an issue that BAME people need to be actually dealing with. But actually, really, if you think about it, if you look at the senior management across the construction industry, it really isn't BAME on the whole. So, I mean, I know that diversity inclusion is an important issue for your organisation, but what practical steps are senior managements, and I appreciate you don't speak on behalf of the whole industry, but like your own, doing to address this issue?
Yeah, I mean, I'm off mute. As you said, Andy, it's part of a much bigger EDI agenda, which we all need to understand better and support. But going back to quickly answer your direct question about what we're doing practically, what we're doing practically within WSP is we have set up a listening group for the BAME, our BAME colleagues, and we've got a small group that have come together, and I'm chairing this, just to learn and understand what the issues are. Because again, we cannot pretend that we understand. And I'm sat here as a white male. We cannot pretend to understand what all the concerns and issues are. I would like to think within my organisation, we won't tolerate any associated bad behaviours that come on the back of recent events. But it's wrong for me to assume that there's nothing underlying. So again, it's to understand and engage and speak to our colleagues so that we can then work together. And it was quite interesting because having had this initial meeting, I and other senior colleagues initially thought the first thing we need to do is to have a more proactive BAME network group within the organisation. But in actual fact, the group that we spoke to said they're not sure that they did want a network set up. So again, it's wrong for us as leaders to make assumptions about these things. We need to understand and engage. And to me, it's all about supporting, listening, and then reacting accordingly.
Mark, we've reached that point in the afternoon, and it is the afternoon now, where we've got to wrap up, and I'm going to finish off with one question, which we often try and find a killer question, but I'm going to actually use someone's question and make that into a killer question if I can, and that's a question from Srinivas Komaraju, and I hope I've pronounced Srinivas's name correctly. And I think, you know, Srinivas is saying, you know, we hear the same issue about talent lost, you know, again. And Srinivas asked, well, what did we learn from the past economic downturn, and what measures did the industry put in to minimise the impact of that? And essentially what Srinivas is saying is, did we learn anything from the past? And I'm going to turn that question around and say, you know, given that to be the case, and given the fact that we're addressing this situation now, how can we ensure that as an industry in the skills area, we don't miss the lessons of the past, and that we make this a turning point as much as we actually can going forward? And I'm going to throw that question first of all at Sarah Beale. Sarah, your thoughts on that, as brief as you can, because we literally are up against the clock.
Yep, sure. I think we've absolutely learned from previous recessions, and I don't think that's any guarantee of the actions being the right thing. But I think everything that's been spoken about today and actions that are already underway, certainly from my perspective, has been because we've looked at what happened last time. We lost apprentices, the level of redundancies were unacceptable, and we never ever got those skills back. We tracked those people and they didn't come back from the sectors to which they went. The talent retention scheme, the advanced support and more support around apprenticeships, keeping those that we've already got, but also the government support this time, I think, has been unprecedented in terms of making sure that people were kept in the roles, and then also that there's advantages to taking on more new recruits with the traineeships and apprenticeship support.
Thanks, Sarah. Katie, your view on that, you know, how do we make sure that we make this a turning point, do things differently?
Can you hear me now? There we go. I think definitely, I mean, we've heard all about it today, but I'm a huge champion and supporter of working together. And we really, we're trying our best. You know, working together means you need more resource to do it. So it is much, much harder, but it really is worth the investment. So certainly one of the things we're going to be doing at Women in Transport over the next year, we've already got relationships started to form with the DFT. And we would really like to see more collaboration, and from collaboration comes learning. So that's what we're going to be looking to do.
Thanks for that, Katie. Mark, how do we make this the harbinger of change, I suppose? How do we make sure that we do things differently going forward, in your view?
Well, yeah, I mean, very briefly, my view on this is the collaboration piece is much, much better this time round. Having been through a few recessions now, I've never known it to be as good. But my message is we all have a part to play in this. We cannot sit back and just expect government to come up with all the answers and solve it for us. And unless the organisations and the businesses take the problem by the scruff of the neck, then we're only going to have ourselves to blame when we come out the other side. But I'm encouraged by the collaboration and the activity that's going on to try and prevent that from happening this time round.
Thanks for that. And Hannah, your closing thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, just echo everything that's been said, yeah, by my other three panelists. I think, yeah, you're absolutely spot on in terms of what we have done and what we need to do. The only additional thing I would add is I think we need to make ourselves more accessible. And actually, again, as Mark says, that is a question of industry leadership and us challenging some of the structures and the routes into the industry that we have in place, because that's the piece I think that's going to help us over the medium term as we grow to attract the right people in. So I think that's a challenge we've yet to solve.
Thanks for that, Hannah. And that's pretty much it for today's webinar and today's, well, and this summer's Infrastructure Intelligence webinar series. But fear not, because we will be back in the autumn with an Infrastructure Intelligence Live series of events, which contains all sorts of interesting debates, discussions, roundtables, showpiece interviews as well. So keep an eye on our website for news of all of those events that are coming up. People who've registered for today's event will receive an email afterwards, and that email will include some of the links that you need to keep abreast of those events that will be coming up. It also contains the link of a couple of really essential events next week that ACE is organising around the construction talent retention scheme. So have a look out for that as well. Just like to thank everybody on today's webinar for logging in, for listening in, and also to thank everybody who's taken part in the whole of our series throughout the summer. We literally couldn't do it without you, and we hope that we have tried to inform and educate in some cases during the course of the last couple of months, and hopefully we'll do it all again come the autumn. I'd also like to pay a special thank you to our sponsors of the webinar series over the course of the summer, to BCG, to Atkins, and also to Barton Willmore. Massive thank you to all of those for helping out. Don't forget as well that you can watch and share all of the webinars in our series on our YouTube channel, which you can find at the link on our Infrastructure Intelligence website. And I'm just going to give a final plug as well, because I can, to Women in Transport. If you I was going to say, if you're a woman and you work in transport, even if you're not, get along to the womenintransport.com website. And if you're a corporate organisation out there looking to support, you know, a fantastic organisation doing great stuff for the transport sector, then get a hold of Katie and the Women in Transport team. Anyway, that's it from us for the summer. Hopefully we'll see you again in the autumn. I'd like to thank all of our panelists today, to Katie, to Sarah, to Hannah, and to Mark. Thanks very much for your input. And that's pretty much it. Hopefully we'll see you in the autumn. Have a great summer, everybody, and stay safe in these challenging times. And hopefully enjoy a bit of sun over this weekend. Tally bye from me and tally bye from everybody else. Thanks very much.